The recent G7 summit revealed deep tensions between the US and Canada, impacting millions across border states. What hidden challenges lie ahead for the American workforce, household budgets, and the country's place on the world stage as these tensions escalate? New England states are now feeling the effects of this diplomatic rift, particularly in the tourism sector. According to the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, Canadian visits have dropped by 20 to 60% compared to last year, delivering a severe blow to local economies. Old Orchard Beach in Maine, and once a favorite spot for Canadians, reports that hotel bookings from Canadian tourists have collapsed by a staggering 90% since spring. These cancellations also extend to long-term investments, such as RV reservations, vacation home rentals, and seasonal beach property leases. Many Canadians are choosing to stay home or spend their vacation money elsewhere, citing uncertainty and a desire to avoid unfriendly border encounters. For thousands of hospitality workers, hotel staff, restaurant employees, and tour guides, especially in small coastal towns, reduced business means fewer hours or even total job loss. Local governments are seeing falling tax revenues, making it difficult to maintain public services in communities that have always depended on Canadian visitors. The shift is causing unease and changing the very fabric of summer traditions. Parents worry about paying bills, while small business owners consider whether they can stay open for another season. If this Canadian boycott persists, economists predict that New England could lose more than $500 million in tourism revenue by the end of 2025. Continued declines would result in further layoffs, diminished community events, and an even slower path to economic recovery for towns and families. The U.S. decision to impose new 20% tariffs on Canadian lumber, aluminum, and energy imports is rippling through multiple industries. The National Association of Home Builders reports that since the tariffs began, average housing construction costs in Massachusetts have increased by 18%, resulting in several affordable housing projects being halted. Craft breweries in Vermont and Massachusetts are now struggling to find aluminum for cans, with some reporting that they've had to lay off up to 25% of their staff due to supply shortages. Energy prices across New England are also rising, with utilities forecasting a combined $2.5 billion increase in the cost of gas and electricity over 5 years. For working families and small businesses, these higher costs are taking a toll. Construction workers, craft brewers, and manufacturers are seeing their incomes shrink, while everyday expenses like food, rent, and gas go up. Some young families who plan to buy their first home are now priced out of the market. In many neighborhoods, delayed construction and business closures contribute to uncertainty and a decline in local prosperity, impacting community well-being and the sense of economic security. Industry observers estimate that if tariffs and energy price hikes persist, over 50,000 jobs could be lost in New England by 2026. Consumer prices for essential goods may rise by another 4% within the next year. Affordable housing projects could remain stalled indefinitely, deepening the region's already critical housing shortage and widening economic divides. New tariffs, 25% on Canadian lumber, aluminum, and energy, are hitting American consumers hard. The National Association of Home Builders reports that housing construction costs in Massachusetts have jumped 18% since the tariffs began, stalling several affordable housing projects. Vermont and Massachusetts craft breweries now struggle with aluminum shortages, with many forced to lay off staff as canned beer supplies dry up. In New England, energy costs have soared, with state utilities estimating a $2.5 billion increase in fuel and electricity expenses in over 5 years for workers. These changes are personal. Construction crews, brewery employees, and manufacturing workers face higher living costs as wages stagnate or jobs disappear. Families planning to buy a first home in Boston or Hartford are now locked out by higher prices. At the grocery store and gas pump, costs continue to rise, making daily life harder for many. If current tariffs remain, industry analysts predict over 15,000 jobs could disappear in New England by 2026. Consumer prices may rise another 4% over the next year. Affordable housing projects could remain frozen, intensifying the region's housing crisis. Canada has publicly stated it will consider increasing tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum if no agreement is reached by July 21st. Meanwhile, France under President Macron has moved to strengthen economic ties with China, signaling decreasing dependence on U.S. trade. These developments mark a notable shift, as long-standing allies now openly consider alternatives to the American economic partnership that once seemed unshakable. Should Canada and European partners limit trade and tourism, millions of U.S. jobs could face mounting risk, especially in states where exports and international visitors are key economic drivers. The U.S. exported more than $1.8 trillion in goods and services in 2024, supporting industries from agriculture to technology. Reduced international collaboration would impact everything from business growth to household savings, and could make life more unpredictable for families, retirees, and young workers alike. Trade specialists now estimate that the U.S. could lose up to 300,000 jobs in export-oriented industries if current trends extend into 2026. Over time, America's diminished influence in global trade networks may translate into slower wage growth, fewer opportunities for innovation, and a reduction in the economic vitality that many communities rely on for the future. Forecasts suggest that economic uncertainty and shifting alliances will challenge American households in the coming months. How should citizens prepare and respond to protect their families and communities in this new global landscape? Container and car shipments into U.S. ports are facing cancellations and delays, stirring concern for consumers and workers. Could this be the early sign of a broader U.S. supply crisis? Container carriers have scrapped up to 30% of trans-Pacific sailings, cutting 20% of capacity to West Coast ports in April, and 24% in early May. Major hubs, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland, saw vessel arrivals drop nearly 50%, from about 12 ships to just 6 per day. Globally, carriers withdrew capacity, equivalent to 1.3 million 40-foot containers, annually, equal to 578,115 TEU. Consumers across the U.S. will notice more empty shelves in major stores, as shipments of popular products are delayed or even canceled. This is especially concerning for families waiting for essential appliances or seasonal goods. Businesses, too, are struggling to maintain normal inventory, forcing some to increase prices to cover rising costs. The logistics industry, already strained, sees hundreds of port workers and truck drivers forced to accept fewer shifts, and many risk being temporarily laid off. For communities dependent on port activity, the slowdown leads to reduced local business, threatening restaurants, shops, and service providers who rely on daily port operations for a stable income. An estimated 37,000 vehicles, including Audi and VW models, remain stranded at U.S. ports since April 2nd, halted by a newly imposed 25% U.S. import tariff. Automakers like GM have paused shipments and are redirecting vehicles into bonded yards to avoid tariffs. Customers looking to purchase new vehicles face long waits or are pushed to buy older models at a premium. The shortage is not limited to luxury brands. Mainstream dealerships also struggle to receive regular inventory, making it harder for families to access affordable transportation. Price increases may push some buyers out of the market altogether. For dealership employees, uncertainty grows as managers cut back hours or postpone new hires. Those working in car transport, detailing, or parts supply feel the ripple effect. facing shrinking paychecks. The lack of fresh stock could even force some local dealerships to close, impacting local economies and causing job losses beyond the auto industry. Beyond containers and cars, bulk goods and agricultural exports have been blocked. U.S. soybean shipments to China plunged 41% year-on-year in Q1 2025. Brazil now supplies around 70% of China's soybeans, while U.S. share dropped to 28% in 2022/2023. Without a deeper trade deal, U.S. exports may shrink to 1.5 billion bushels, down from 1.865 billion, risking price declines to $9 per bushel. Higher costs for food, electronics, and auto parts. Businesses pay extra for storage or cancel orders altogether. Logistics slowdowns hurt workers' incomes in retail, trucking, and warehousing. Despite a 90-day tariff truce, reducing U.S. duties on Chinese imports to 30% from 145%, blank sailings remain high, up to 28% cancellations, and ports stay quiet. No definitive relief or federal plan appears, and regional leaders are pressing for action. Household budgets tighten as prices rise. Middle-class families may cut spending further. Economic recovery slows, reducing room for local support programs and job creation. Elon Musk has publicly distanced himself from Washington, denouncing a major government spending bill and withdrawing support from federal programs. Could this signal a shift in America's tech leadership? Elon Musk slammed Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, calling it a disgusting abomination, warning it would add over $2.5 trillion to the deficit. Stocks reacted sharply. Tesla dropped 14.2%, wiping out around $152 billion in market value in a single day. With a national deficit ballooning by $2.4 trillion over the next decade, the top 10% of earners would gain an average of $12,000, while the bottom 10% would lose around $1,600 in healthcare and nutrition benefits. Everyday Americans face long-term consequences: higher taxes, reduced federal services, and a growing national debt. The sudden $150 billion market drop also threatened retirement plans, eroding household wealth. Over time, rising interest payments, projected to reach $550 billion over 10 years, will crowd out investments in health, education, and infrastructure. Musk's refusal to grant full military control of Starlink in conflict zones led the Pentagon to sideline SpaceX in key contracts, shifting deals to Lockheed Martin and Boeing. Meanwhile, Starlink is expanding globally. India agreed licenses in March 2025, and unauthorized access persists in South Africa and Brazil. Around 2.3 million Starlink subscribers, many in rural areas, could lose stable service, and satellite internet may cost 53% more than fiber over 30 years. As Starlink loses priority in U.S. defense, national cybersecurity and command depend on less advanced systems. Businesses reliant on uninterrupted internet risk, slower operations, or higher premiums. Costs often pass to consumers. Tesla has quit all federally funded U.S. EV charging projects, pivoting overseas. It signed a nationwide charging agreement with Brazil, independent of U.S. policy. In China, Tesla is deploying AI-based energy systems to optimize power grids, an opportunity denied to most U.S. rivals. With Tesla exiting federal programs, domestic EV charging infrastructure may slow significantly. The public charger network needs to grow 4 times by 2025 and 20 times by 2030 to meet national goals. That's 1.2 million public chargers needed. Failure to scale risks, stalling EV adoption, costing domestic jobs, and delaying consumer access to green transport. Elon Musk's enterprises, Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink, and xAI, are ramping up operations in non-Western countries, stepping away from Washington's oversight. They've been dropped from national advisory groups on AI and EV infrastructure in favor of U.S. giants like Google and Microsoft. America risks losing its competitive edge. Rising debt, now at $36 trillion, with interest payments nearing $1 trillion yearly, limits federal support for innovation. With Musk's tech empire bypassing federal collaboration, the U.S. could see slower tech advancement, reduced high-tech job creation, and weakened policy influence.